So Stony Stanley Bushie grew up on the Little Grand Rapids First Nation. The chief of the First Nation told APTN uh, that Bushie was not homeless. So according to them, he lived in Little Grand Rapids and was in Winnipeg for just a couple weeks with some friends. He decided to walk to the store by himself against the urging of those around him who indicated it may not be safe to walk around in that area of the city at that time, as it was getting dark out that day. Stanley Stony Bushie was thrown to the ground by a man who beat him with an object before dragging his limp body back to the corner of a construction site where it was found 21 hours later by a security guard doing his Saturday evening rounds, according to video surveillance footage. So, essentially, sometimes there's people of indigenous background, they still live on the reserve, at least on paper. So it's not that they're homeless, but when they're in Winnipeg, they don't have a permanent residence here. And my understanding is that it kind of works against them if they don't at least portray themselves as solely living on the reserve. So they're almost kind of incentivized to urban camp and stay in the city without really having any fixed residence that they can live at, or else their benefits, I guess, would get cut off. So how did this happen, basically? What went on? Bushie's body was found about 6:30 p.m. It was behind the APTN's headquarters, which sits across Portage Avenue, right across from the MTS Center, basically, where the Winnipeg Jets play. Surveillance video captured Friday evening of that year by the cameras on ATM's building showed a man who was wearing a dark long-sleeve top and a backpack, and he returned to the bodies about 2 hours after the attack. So APTN was the Aboriginal People's Television Network. That was before they started preferring Indigenous instead of Aboriginal, but they kept the name. So they hand over footage, and it kind of details the whole thing. It's about 9:06 p.m. on Friday, so people are already kind of worried if you're walking around on the streets alone downtown as early as about 9 o'clock. Even if you're, kind of older middle-aged gentleman, indigenous background, it's not safe. So he's walking around there. The two kind of cross paths. They enter the rear parking lot. Bushie's kind of following behind the man, and the man's basically walks around the trailer. Bushie doesn't really want to go any further. The man's kind of trying to convince Bushie to follow him there. The man's hesitant. Bushie's pointing over there. He walks over there. Hey, it's safe. Come on, come over here. The guy's like, I don't really want to go there. Guy goes into a porta potty, follows him in there. Kind of goes in for a second, then quickly exits. Then the guy comes out later. They never really go in together. So they head back to the street. The man's kind of pointing back towards the area where the body was found at the construction site, the trailer. There's some strong winds blowing. There's some cardboard into the air. The pedestrian and vehicle traffic seems to more or less slow down and stop completely. The two men are talking for about a minute longer before the man throws Bushie to the ground, and the man uses a blunt object to beat Bushie several times. So I don't really know what was going on because they don't have sound on the video, but unusual. So then the man drags Bushie's body back to the corner construction area. The man returns to the same spot about 2 hours later. And then, the body was found next to red plastic pylon, wooden board, and a pile of pipes. So Bushie, who was 48 at the time, was killed across the street from where police found the body of another gentleman named Donald Collins, who was 65 at that time. And that was about 12:45 a.m. So cousins of the 65-year-old homicide victim, Donald Collins, says he lived in Kenora and Winnipeg. So the cousin says the family could not believe someone would kill him in Winnipeg. The 65-year-old body was found in the alley near the 300 block of Hargrave Street early Saturday morning. His death was one of 2 homicides that were discovered in the area that same day. Both homicides involved men who were without adequate housing in the city or spent time on the streets, homeless. We're very deeply saddened by what has happened to Donnie, said Valerie Canfield, the cousin in Kenora. She said that Colin spent time between Kenora and Winnipeg, but she couldn't say how long he was in Manitoba capital, and she confirmed that he was homeless. So she just said, we just want to come to terms with do the right thing, give him a proper burial, and hope that the person who did this is made to pay for the crime, she said. Winnipeg police have charged John Paul Ostamas, 39, with first-degree murder in connection with the deaths of Collins and Stony Stanley Bushie, 48. So Ostamas, who himself was homeless, was also charged with the second-degree murder in the death of 37-year-old Myles Monias, who was found beaten to death in a bus shelter on Main Street and Pioneer Avenue on April 10th. The family of a man who died after being seriously beaten at the Winnipeg bus stop gathered at a site to say their goodbyes. Monias' family and friends honored him with a song, prayer, and a birthday cake at the bus stop. So that's more typical of kind of inner city, lower income society. You see it a lot on First 48. Somebody dies, they crowd where they died, or together they let off balloons. Kind of a brief celebration of life. I call it kind of the hood funeral, although a lot of people do that and have the funeral. But you don't see a lot of suburbanites gather to where their loved one died and do some type of candlelighting or ceremony. It's not as common, depending on the situation, but, So, apparently, Monias' father, Ron Monias, said his son died just hours before his 37th birthday. Monias said his son had recently fallen on hard times. Myles and his girlfriend had broken up, and he had been between homes for about 3 weeks. So it's tough. Newly homeless, he'd been on the streets about 3 weeks. It's not a short amount of time to be without a home. If you've ever tried that, 3 weeks can feel like a long time. But, the unfortunate reality is that he was homeless. I guess his girlfriend put him out. She must have been paying the bills or had the home, I assume. And he ran into trouble. So Myles had said, the father, that use good memories of me to heal your heart, and that's what I'm going to do. And Monias, who's from Garden Hill First Nation. So these are all Indigenous gentlemen that are involved in this particular case. So what was said is that they had no place to run, they had no place to hide. Each was left to bleed to death in the most horrible of circumstances, Linebird said. All 3 men were homeless, had substance abuse problems, and were intoxicated and unable to defend themselves when they were killed. I believe this is a Crown attorney. Monias, 37, was beaten in a bus shelter at Portage Avenue in Maine. So right at Portage in Maine, a bus shelter, I guess in and around that area. None really jumps out at the top of my head, but I would assume kind of probably Portage and Gary more so. And he later died in the hospital. Bushie was 48 and Collins 65 were lured from Hargrave Street in Ellis, and they're both beaten to death, more or less in the same area. Collins was stabbed and strangled. Bushie had 71 different injuries. So Limbert explained that Bushie was left unrecognizable after he was attacked with a 2x4 and a steel bar. So violent deaths, seemingly unprovoked, 3 bodies in a pretty quick succession of time. We would classify that as a spree killer. So, one of the last people to see Ostamas before he was arrested was Brenda Sinclair, who said she was about to rent one of her rooms to him. Yesterday morning, I sat and had a coffee with him, Sinclair said Tuesday. He seemed like a nice guy. Sinclair said police visited her later on Monday to ask about Ostamas, and she demanded to know what he is accused of doing. What did he do? I said, because I need to know. This man was about to live with me, she exclaimed. So, she's looking to kind of get her bills covered. She's looking to rent a room. Guy, I guess, applied or caught wind of it. They're sitting down. Hey, let's, meet at Tim Hortons or something. We'll have a coffee. Let me get to, get a vibe off of you. And the next thing she knows, the cops are coming to talk to her. I don't know how they knew that he talked to her. Maybe they went through his phone and figured that, well, who's this person he's going to meet up with for coffee? And she's like, what's going on? This guy's about to move in with me. Like, what's happening? So she was shocked learning that Ostamas was facing 3 murder charges, and she added that she cannot believe how close she came to living with a suspected serial killer. So, technically they were spaced apart in time. It wasn't, in my opinion, a serial killer, but if you want to look at it, they fit the same MO, they fit the same pattern. It's definitely multiple bodies. Let's not argue over semantics. There's women in Thunder Bay, Kenora areas that recall unprovoked attacks, knives left in bedrooms, because Ostamas was known to be transient and move between Northwest Ontario and Winnipeg. While the Winnipeg police says it had little contact with Ostamas before the murder charges were laid, he was no stranger to the justice system in northwestern Ontario. He has a criminal record dating back to 1995 that includes violent crimes against women and men in Kenora and Thunder Bay, Ontario. So we started in Western Ontario, towards the Manitoba border. Thunder Bay and Kenora are not super far from Winnipeg. That'll get you, 10 hours. You could probably make your way out there. Kenora's a lot closer. Court documents indicate that Ostamas had been charged with more than 40 times for offenses that range from mischief, uttering threats, to assault with a weapon, assault causing bodily harm. So, he fancied himself a real tough guy. He's living on the streets, more or less, transient, bouncing from place to place, unprovoked attacks, even against women. So, court documents indicate he was charged more than 40 times, and one of his victims, who was a woman, along with her husband, took care of an apartment building in northwestern Ontario. One night, 8 years prior to the homicides, Ostamas caused a commotion when the couple tried to quiet him down, according to the woman. So, the typical drunk or high rowdy. A lot of homeless are, on all types of substances and, acting out. So, him and his common law had a creepy feeling. Her and her common law had a creepy feeling, said the mother of alleged victim in an interview. They didn't like the atmosphere around us and around their daughter. So he was he was charged with assault and uttering threats in connection to another case involving a woman near Thunder Bay. And he basically, so to start with the first situation, the first woman, he came at the husband, started pounding on the husband. She said, "Hey, what are you doing?" He turned around and gave her a couple of shots, she said. And it wasn't provoked, not in the least. So this is, this guy, I guess, he's a scrapper, and he's using his hands on people, and it didn't take much. And I guess he figured, he's a tough guy. Again, another woman he was bullying. The woman said the mother of the woman said that the daughter was dating Ostamas at the time. So the daughter and Ostamas were staying with her for a few weeks. And she found knives in the bedroom after she put them out. The woman said she also remembers Ostamas pounding the back of her minivan seat and being verbally abusive to her daughter during a family road trip to the United States. So, you see tweakers like that. They're loud, they're tough guys, they're kicking on doors. There's another video I did. The alarm went off in the middle of the video earlier today, just like that guy. And I almost had to go out there and see what was going on, but he scurried off. So, we see these types. Doesn't always escalate as it did in the case of Ostamas. But he had clear anger management issues. So the mom was getting afraid of him. He was trying to get the daughter out of the van so he can go sell her in stateside somewhere, she said. So I guess they're traveling to the States, and he's just figured he was going to, start pushing P. He was laying his gorilla pimp hand down. And he didn't give a fuck if mama was right there neither. He said, be careful before I turn your shit out too, because I'm trying to, get some money out of hoe ass. You understand? And pussy will sell. As the great Dolomite said, if pussy don't sell, grits ain't grainy, and the Mona Lisa's a motherfucking man. Now, I hope I didn't step on my outro already, but following the alleged assault, the woman said that her daughter broke up with Ostamas. Probably a good decision. Charlie O'Keefe, a band counselor from Ebemetung First Nation, or Fort Hope First Nation in northwestern Ontario, confirmed to CBC News that John Paul Ostamas is a band member there. Ostamas has been in Winnipeg off and on for the past 10 years and stayed at a number of homeless shelters. So it's an issue with the system. They have to establish their residence in the Native Reserve or Indigenous communities, whatever, to get their benefits, and they don't want to live there. So they live there on paper, and they kind of float around. This guy was a prime example. Greg Brodsky, the accused lawyer, says Ostamas has no fixed address and spent a lot of time on the street. He needs some legal help, Brodsky said. He's in a lot of trouble. Yeah, well, when you're staring down 3 bodies, he's going to have a new fixed address somewhere, but it's going to be a penitentiary. Brodsky said his client lived in Fort Hope until he was 7 years old, then moved around at least 4 Facebook pages under Ostamas' name, 2 of which use the name Jonathan Ostamas. All show similar photos of him. One of the accounts was active until April 26, one day before he was picked up. He wrote that the legal system did him wrong and violated his rights, and called the RCMP and police the worst criminals on earth. Just don't call the cops, Facebook post reads. A different post on April 17th included comments like, I be mobbing, and doing things like always hit them up, and just don't call the cops. So I don't know, they're trying to pull up his Facebook post. He was obviously not just a tough guy when it came to females, he's an internet tough guy as well. He's hard, as far as he's concerned. And if you don't put some respect on him, apparently he might belt you. He might catch a hat. But he's saying the police was the problem. So at the end of the day, a lot of this was caught on camera. He had another post on Facebook that said, the crime familia. So, I mean, I don't know. I see these types walk past the shop every 5 fucking minutes. Um, Wandering, drug-addicted zombies who, in some cases, aren't even in their right mind. And this guy is posting all on Facebook, probably on Tim Hortons Wi-Fi or something, about La Crime Familia, but in all honesty, he was just another tweaker, some random crackhead wandering around. There was no Familia, the police weren't after him, but we see these types around the city all the time. So, but apparently he told the lawyer, his client had told police that the killings were out of revenge, but claims now that that's not the case. He's claiming in the agreed statement of facts that what he did was vengeance for people who raped his girlfriend. Brodsky told reporters outside of the courthouse Tuesday. So, I don't know. He was trying to pimp one girlfriend. Now he's a vigilante trying to track down what he claims are various rapists and kill them out of revenge. But then he kind of backed off of that because it obviously made no sense. And then that would also be first-degree murder. So he didn't want to plead to first-degree murder. And that was kind of him just putting himself up for first-degree murder by even saying that. So his lawyer said, I don't think you really want to go with that. I know you think people might sympathize with you, but you're just confessing to first-degree murder. So he said, oh, wait, no, I just made that up. So Brodsky, the lawyer's doing his best, said the client would not enter a claim of not criminally responsible in court. Brodsky said his client has been in and out of mental hospitals most of his life, and afterwards said that would make not criminally responsible claim difficult. So, not criminally responsible is a cleaned up word for pleading insanity. So he said, look, I don't think we're going to go with that defense. He's been in and out of hospitals most of his life, so he would have caught a diagnosis. And he's not diagnosed with anything other than thinking that he's a gangster. So, we're at a point where he's been discharged so many times, and we have an opinion in connection with his mental status and ability to instruct counsel that we determined it would be inappropriate. So a lot of homeless people sometimes fake mental illnesses, and once they've been discharged a number of times, the doctors are just kind of like, yeah, I've seen you 10 times. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not any more insane now than the last 10 times I told you. You can't stay here. So you need to leave. There's nothing, we're not diagnosing you with a mental illness. So he tried it again kind of in court, and they said, look, you've already got a history of this. So this is the quintessential Winnipeg homeless guy almost. He's run the full gambit. And he's slipping through the cracks of the system, to say the least. He lived in the cracks of the system. So they're trying to figure out what they're going to do, and lo and behold, I can guarantee where it's headed. Brodsky, even to my surprise here, Brodsky also did not push for a Gladue report, but a joint recommendation between the defense and Crown allows for Ostamas' history to be taken into consideration. So we talk about the Gladue report a lot on this channel. It's basically where they say that if you're Indigenous, you're not as criminally responsible as somebody who's not Indigenous because of racism. So if you came up in the foster system, if you were raised by addicts, then you're not as criminally responsible as the rest of Canadians, and you deserve a lighter sentence because of your ethnic background. But they said, look, let's just take his background into consideration because he didn't even really have a strong enough Gladue report. Never went into CFS. His parents weren't addicts. I think he just lived a traditional Indigenous life on the reserve and then didn't want to live up there and made his way into the streets. So, yeah, he's killing people about 18 hours apart. People have actually 4 hours between a couple of the killings. So Collins was found dead on April 25th, 2015. near 329 Hargrave. St. Bushie's body was found about 18 hours later behind 333 Portage Ave, so if you know, that's like a block apart. And police said at the time the men had been killed within 4 hours of each other, those two. So the bodies were found a little while different, actually killed like 4 hours between each other. So he killed one guy, and 4 hours later he's still kind of steamed up, and he just kills another guy. So the families, are in court. Everybody's trying to get this thing, I guess, resolved. Monias was beaten at the Main Street bus shelter on April 10th, 2015. A couple weeks prior, he later died in hospital. Brodsky said the fact that the two killings were caught on surveillance video made fighting the case extremely difficult. He said the video also played a role in a speedy trial, which ultimately wrapped up just over a year after the killings. So yeah, a real bulldog, this public defender. He basically said, I don't really have a defense. I don't even want to do a glad do. I got fuck all. I don't even want to fight. He's on camera. Like, you know what? What do you guys want me to do? Like, the guy's guilty. Like, this might be the Lionel Hutz of Winnipeg public defenders. If you don't know who Lionel Hutz is, that was a Simpsons character. He's just like a god-awful lawyer. I'm not going to put it on this guy because he might be out there, doing his thing now, but he didn't exactly eat this case. So, yeah. I mean, it makes for a different kind of defense. You made me this way. You made me like this, Ostamas told the court moments before he was sentenced. So he took no accountability for any of it. Ostamas, who was apparently schizophrenic, didn't say why he killed the men, but did say he was sorry, willing to accept the consequences, and that he knew he was wrong. So that's why he can't say not criminally responsible, is because he knew what he was doing was wrong. In Canada, if you can prove that you didn't feel what you did was wrong, you're not responsible for what you do. And we will touch on that. So the families of Monias and Bushie were in the court where they heard once again the grisly details of their loved ones' murders. The family said, I'm happy to know he'll be gone for a long time. That's what the father, Myles Monias, said. A society does not have to live with this man. Monias said he had forgiven Ostamas, but the killer's apology in court was irrelevant. He said, it didn't do anything to me because I could never get my son back. I have nothing to say before and after when he apologized. It's no consequence to me because I'll never see my son again, Monias said. He said his son Myles was just like any other kid. He loved to play hockey, played sports, did music. He also loved cooking and hunting. I'm sure he will miss saying, I love you, son, every morning. So his dad is devastated. I mean, they're obviously pretty close. If they're saying I love you in general at these age ranges between men, and he's saying it every morning into the man's adulthood, but he couldn't go to dad when he got put out by the girlfriend, and dad might have been up north and he wasn't trying to go back. So Ostamas stared straight ahead while Lineberg recounted how the men died, but he sometimes looked down. Bushie's family members began sobbing and left the courtroom. It's hard without you here. Victims' families, Lineberg read statements from the men's families, including one from Bushie's niece that said he was a man who loved to hunt, play cards, and spend time with his nieces and nephews. He was the grandma's baby. He was her favorite. The statement said, whenever I would see him, he would tell me to take care of myself. So Bushie's niece knew the uncle had a drinking problem. She was worried about him when he visited Winnipeg. He had lost his mother in 2011 and just left for Winnipeg permanently, where he lived on the streets. So she said, it's been hard without you here. It's almost like the Creator didn't want to see you suffer anymore. The motive for the killing remains unclear. Ostamas said he was seeking retribution for sexual assault on his pregnant girlfriend by 4 men, but police have not been able to verify the incident ever took place. So I don't know if he had an expectant woman out here. Again, he's schizophrenic. They don't really elaborate on much of his claims. A statement from Ostamas' sister said he was a normal kid until he hit his teenage years. After an altercation with police during a break-in, he had to be hospitalized, suffered scars, and fell into a deep depression. So, he got caught in a break-in, tried to resist arrest, and they beat his ass. And it messed with his head. He left him with a few scars. He's depressed. He later attempted suicide multiple times, had hallucinations, and would go long periods without eating. So, it did seem like he definitely had some serious mental health issues. I don't know why they kept discharging him. I don't know why he's not deemed criminally responsible, but ultimately, the safety net, the drag net caught him, the last possible strand, and put him in the prison. So, it's tough. The lawyer said, or requested that he not be charged with any further crimes, though he confessed to additional killings in written statements. The lawyer said those are false confessions. He didn't kill any of those people. He's building himself into a person he's not in order to survive in the remand center in the jail system, said Brodsky. We're not suggesting he go anywhere but a federal institution. Brodsky said his client had problems that should have been addressed over the years. Ostamas has a lengthy criminal record dating back to 2002 with 16 convictions of violent incidents, including assault with a weapon, uttering threats. Lineberg said Ostamas described himself as a killing machine in a written confession to the murders, and the statement read as an egocentric, me-focused diatribe. The crimes forced the city into a state of terror, she said. Winnipeg was held hostage in the days after the murders when police warned the public someone was targeting the city's most vulnerable people. She said, rehabilitation isn't realistic or viable in Ostamas' case, she said. And the serial killer, spree killer, John Paul Ostamas, was sentenced to life in prison with no parole eligibility for 75 years for the 2015 killings of 3 homeless men in the streets of Winnipeg. So this was a very brief window where they were doing consecutive sentencing. So rather than concurrent, where now you can't do more than 25 years to life. At that time, they said 25 for each body served consecutively. So we'll talk about parole after 75 years. Effectively, you're never getting out. Unless you live to past 100 in prison, then you're still not going to get parole. So, that's kind of the Ostamas story, long and the short of it. He's 40 years old at the time he copped this 75-year sentence. I mean, you can do the math. The Supreme Court struck down the provision that allows for cumulative sentences for multiple murders. This provision was adopted by the conservative government of Stephen Harper in 2011. In the ruling, they said it was cruel and unusual punishment. So John Paul Ostamas, who's 45, later when they struck it down, he had 3 consecutive, and apparently now it's 25 instead of 75. So we know the story. Those 3 sentences on top would mean he would die behind bars guaranteed. So they kind of appealed it. They overturned it. He's not going to stay for the 75 years. And they vacated the consecutive life sentences. So he pled guilty to the triple murders. The 75-year sentence was the longest ever served in Manitoba or sentenced in Manitoba. He's expected to agree to an amendment because of the cruel and unusual punishment. So now he can apply for parole until 2040 instead of 2090. Who knows if he'll get it, but when the news appeal broke, the defense attorney he had then, Ryan Amy, warned that if the appeal were successful, the client would simply be given the opportunity to ask for, not necessarily get released from prison. In accordance with the country's new law, the Manitoba court simply replaced Ostamas' consecutive sentence with a concurrent one. Nothing else about them changes. He's still got a life tag. So they tried to put him under the jail. Natural life, the rest of your natural life behind bars. In Canada, when you murder 3 innocent people in cold blood, the court deems life essentially without parole to be cruel and unusual. Up until 1976, they used to hang murderers in Canada by rope. The last hangings took place in 1962. So they were still sentencing people, but the last hangings themselves actually took place in 1962 until 1976, when they just abolished it completely. The surveillance video was another nail in the coffin. Not criminally responsible and Gladue report were his best options. His lawyer pushed for neither. The non-criminally responsible was deemed as unlikely because as a homeless man, he tended to try and get mental health assessments in hopes of a warm bed on far too many occasions, to a point where he became a recognized regular by the doctors and hospital staff, often turned away with zero treatment whatsoever. Some might contend that one lesson we can draw from this is two things can be true. Ostamas both needed a warm bed on some nights and was also clearly mentally ill. Another source of a warm bed and a minimal mental health treatment is the prison system. It's unclear why Ostamas' defense opted not to get a Gladue report. Some might argue it was because he's an ineffective public defender who is essentially in league with the Crown prosecution. They were fixed to crucify him regardless. 3 life tags, consecutive 25-year parole eligibility periods. The minimum parole eligibility period in a second-degree murder is 10 years. There is no doubt 3 innocent victims. Was it premeditated? Well, you'd probably need a little bit more effective attorney to argue against that. However, he's sitting for those 25 with an L tag. It could have been 10 with an L. It really doesn't make a huge difference. Ostamas killed these 3 innocent victims brutally, savagely, and seemingly without remorse. He's a violent, homeless, mentally ill addict, and left untreated and unremedied, it resulted in the deaths of 3 men. The systems Canadian tax dollars are putting into place are seemingly ineffective and miserably failing those who rely upon them. There was never any hope for a decent life in Canadian society for Ostamas. He's just another statistic, another negative Indigenous stereotype. Whether it's 25 years or 75 years of parole eligibility, the likelihood still remains that Ostamas will never be released. He was born into a system that was leading to one of 2 places: unnatural death or jail. There is no evidence that Ostamas even had a girlfriend, or that any such sexual assaults took place. All indications are that he just decided to go on a killing spree for no apparent reason. Evil, insanity, there's always a thin line between the two. What we can be certain of is there are hundreds, if not thousands, of John Ostamases rolling around our society right now as we speak. Right past this window I'm looking at right now, I could see 10 to 20 a day, just like them. All you have to do is be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and one of them might run up on you and cave your skull in with a metal pipe. Winnipegology.